Ooh, what you got? A
Oh, this is
smoothie.
so it's actually an iced mocha. So I don't drink real coffee. I just drink like grown up chocolate milk. So like maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe longer, but I doubt it. I realized that mocha is just like chocolate syrup with espresso and some milk. So now I
Yeah.
drink these way too often, more than I want
Yeah.
to admit on the air.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. I just like a little bit of coffee with my creamer. So I'm with you 100%.
And the best part is I've got a dentist appointment right after this interview. So like I'm sure my dentist is gonna love this.
Yeah, you gotta brush them real good. Brush
I'm
them
gonna
real good.
I'm
You'll
gonna pull
never
out the
know.
I'm gonna pull out the water pick and everything, just like try and clean it all up before I go.
That's right. That's right. Mr. Thirsty. I just introduced my kids to the dentist, and their favorite part was Mr. Thirsty. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
straw, right? You know,
Yeah, the sucker.
so you know what's funny is now, like as a grown up, I feel like dentists don't even like really, they're just kind of like they don't even tell you what to do
Right,
with it.
right.
Like I'm waiting for instruction, like, hey, you know, that you can move this around. They just put it and hook it in your mouth and just leave
Yeah.
it there. And it's like, can I touch it? When I was a kid, I used to
Yeah.
be able to touch it. Like
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're drooling out of one side of your mouth
I'm
and don't know why.
drowning. I'm drowning, Jen, in my spit. I'm just like, I'm gargling. And he's like, and then he'll just go, it's like he gives me the nice little courtesy of, all right, now let's get back to business. I'm like, is that it? You want to like take every piece of saliva in your mouth and just push it forward and try and get it out. And then like,
Yes.
okay. I find the
Yes.
hardest thing for me now is the jaw. I can't keep my mouth open for like that long anymore.
Which is amazing because it sounds like you basically talk for a living. So
I never
the
shut up.
it's like a good.
But see, there's the good thing about this is that I've learned to practice listening. So like there's times when I rest my jaw.
Oh, I see. I see. At the dentist is definitely the place to not do that.
Yeah.
You lose
Yeah.
a finger and they'll never invite you back.
This is true. This is true. I found a guy right down the street from me, so I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah, it's a good relationship.
It is.
Close proximity.
It's working for me.
That's good. Oh, I love it.
So yeah, how are you?
Good. Like 20 years older than I think the last time we talked, which I don't know.
I know.
It's amazing how time flies.
It's funny because like I feel like I feel like we've been Facebook friends, and when I wrote you, I told you like I feel like I've always known like people around you, your mom working in the school and your sister being in chorus. I just always knew like I felt like the people around you, and I never really knew you much at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, I was thinking about this like over the last couple of days, you know, working myself through the anxiety of getting recorded. And I was thinking, you know, I don't remember a lot from high school, like just in general, like that time in my life. And I hope it's not early onset Alzheimer's or some sort, but I definitely don't remember like why didn't we hang out? Why wasn't I like a part of all these circles that you still see on Facebook? And I think I was so like heads down involved in relationships throughout high school that it just like I never had a big group of friends, you know, and Nikki did, my sister did, right? She always had somebody that she's hanging out with. My mom was yelling at just about every student in the school, so she knew everybody. It was just me
That's
in
funny.
the corner making out with somebody or something.
I was gonna say the one thing I do remember about you is like long-term relationship as far as like with Pat, right? That's what I remember.
Pat.
Yeah, that's the most smiling guy in school. Now in competition for greatest beard of class of 2001. I think it's me, him, and Sean McAmin in competition for best beard of the class.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I saw he's in Hawaii, right?
He's in Hawaii.
Yeah. How freaking cool.
And
you're probably seeing it, right? Like everybody kind of going everywhere, doing everything.
Yeah, and when before the pandemic happened, and I was like, oh well, you know, I was doing these in person, and it was like, well, I'll travel, you know, I'll travel to California, and maybe I'll be able to get like 3 or 4 while I'm out there, and then I was like, circling Hawaii, like when it's time to do Pat's podcast, I'm flying out there to Hawaii. But for you, like I feel like maybe through Jess, I kind of like just knew about you peripherally, right?
Yes.
Um, and then of course I did a quick dive into the yearbook because in my head I'm like, wasn't wasn't she like voted most attractive or most popular or like one of those kind of like popularity type of contests I felt like we did. And then I scroll through and I go, homecoming queen.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. Homecoming queen. I have that double spread in the yearbook, right? Those 2 pages, that exciting moment. And so here's the perspective of that moment from the other side, right? So you're on stage and you're praying that you don't trip. And oh, by the way, so remember when they like walk down the field? There's like electrical cords all across the field for like the lights.
Yeah.
And all I remember thinking is don't trip. Like, obviously, I have a thing about like embarrassing myself during all of these anxieties. So, like, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip. You get on the stage and there's steps. Oh my gosh, she put steps on a stage. Like, step up the stage, you're standing there, and the utter like wow factor of your name being called was like definitely one of those moments in my childhood where I thought, holy cow, like I could totally rule the world. And then I stood there, Brad, and I stood there for like 5 minutes or something, like way too long. Like, okay, somebody tell me what to do now, because this is too exciting for me to make any of my own decisions about at this point. But I remember being up there thinking, like, this is really neat. Like, I really appreciate this moment, like in my childhood. I will forever remember that. And so I think my mom's got it on camera, and the camera, like the video camera, like one of these jobs.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I could hear her. She goes, I can't believe she won. I just can't believe she won. I remember thinking, really, Mom?
That's kind of what you say in you have like a whole write-up about it where you kind of say that in the beginning, like, I can't believe I won. But then you're also like, I don't want to say that I don't deserve it or that, or that I do deserve something like that. But it's very like youthful, but at the same time, like attempting to be mature. And
yeah, that's funny. And we decided that it was going to be the business of homecoming. So we like wore suits, right? Instead of like cute dresses or whatever, like we all decided to wear suits. And I went shopping for my first suit. I think it was at like Forever 21 or something like that, which is obviously the place to get your professional apparel from.
First job attire.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 100%. Yeah, it was totally fun. Yeah. And then I think that year, Malik Carr was prom queen, right? I remember that.
Okay.
And she was up
See,
there.
I didn't go to prom, so.
What? No prom?
No, I never went to like any high school dances, events. I hated dressing up. I didn't like dancing. I didn't like the idea of like having to bare my soul and ask a girl to go to a dance with me. Like none of those things were in my repertoire of what I did. I was good at I was good at cracking wit, getting involved in other people's business, talking really loud. And occasionally some singing. Like those were kind of, and random wrestling knowledge. Those were really that was my wheelhouse of talents.
Yeah. In high school. I mean, how much better does it get, right?
Yeah. None of those things ever come into play for the prom. I do remember senior year in a calculus class, Steph Hughes, who was, I think, a grade below us, asked me, "Are you going to prom?" And I'm like, "Oh my God. This is oh my God, is Steph Hughes gonna ask me to go to prom like right here in class?" And I go, "I'm not sure yet." Why? She goes, "Because we need someone to videotape it."
Is that when you put your foot down and was like, absolutely not, I'm never doing this ever?
Yeah, I was like, I'm not, no weddings, no proms. I'm not doing this.
So do you have any regrets? Any regrets not doing any of those?
About not going to school dances?
Yeah.
No, not from like a missed the event type of thing. More from probably just from like a social, like I think I missed. I mean, I think a lot of part of this, like when I do these podcasts now and talking to people and like talking to them about what was like their social life like, because I watched the life that I imagine kids that we went to school with, the life that I imagine they were having was based off of Saved by the Bell, 90210. I was
Yeah.
very, obsessed with those shows. And so that's what I imagine was happening. Pretty girls, drinking, drugs, making mistakes. And I
Yeah.
didn't do any of that stuff. And so I think I just missed more of like the camaraderie, the relationships, the socializing with the girls. Those type of things were like what I kind of missed. But like the standing around at the prom when people are like, man, you should have been there. It's like, really? Like, I didn't even go to football games. That wasn't like going to the football games on Friday night wasn't my thing. But what I was more into was like what happens after the football games. Once everyone's met up, where are they going? That's what I was way more curious about than actually hanging out on the sidelines.
Yeah. Did you have restrictions? Like, were your parents pretty strict about you going out, staying out late, who you were out with? Did you have a lot of boundaries there?
The funny thing is that so my parents got divorced after seventh grade. So from eighth grade on, I lived with my mom, and my
Yeah.
mom was not very strict in that way, but also she knew all of my friends. Um,
Yeah.
and none of my friends were partiers or anything like that. Like my best
Yep.
friend was Ray Campion. Ray's mom was my mom's best friend. So like all of our friends kind of stemmed from that circle somehow. And so
Yeah.
my mom never like said like you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. I never ventured out into those things. I remember like one time I didn't come home like on a Sunday until like 11:30, and I came home and I
Yeah.
think my mom was on the phone like with her sister or something, and I came in, she was like, "Where the hell were you?" Like, and I was like, "Oh, I was like literally just riding around listening to music with one of my friends." And she was
Yeah.
like, "Don't do that again, like being out till almost midnight on a Sunday night and not telling me." And
Yeah.
I was like, and I kind of knew I was probably pushing it, but I was like, well, I don't, there's nothing going on anyway. So like that was like as strict as it got, but I just never
Yeah.
did anything crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, buddy. I felt like I was a really good kid. And so I didn't need all the restrictions. We did have a lot of restrictions. We were the house that people went to. So my mom was always, made sure that kids came to our place versus we going somewhere else. And I
Hmm.
think to keep an eye on them, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you little rascals up to? Um, so we always came to our house. So it's not like I was going to sneak out of my own house and everybody was at my house.
Right. Right.
Although, speaking of sneaking out, I did sneak out of a window one time at an unnamed friend's house because I don't know if her parents know. I guess 20 years later, they probably wouldn't care. But I did sneak out of the house one time and did the whole like ran down the driveway with no shoes on, got into a car of like unknown people at the end of the road. And I think to myself now, first of all, it's amazing that I survived that night. Second of all, I would kill my children. If they did survive that night, I would kill them myself. And what the heck goes through the kids' heads that don't follow the rules, you know?
For me, I had FOMO. So, and still do at
Mm.
times when you see like a group of friends, and I don't think we knew what that was at the time, but when you see a group of friends
Yeah.
hanging out or just people that maybe you admire. And I think that was a lot of like, I think that's a lot of like that cool kid, that,
Mhm.
philosophy, or when like you look out and you see the cool kids and the whole stereotype, it's like, I want to be in that world. And so I think just like, what are they doing? I think that's the pull that people who are in it also are like, well, I got to
Yeah.
stay in this world. I got to go out and do it. Or I got to, when you get like a lifeline to get in there, it's like, you can't pass this up, right? It's super bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super bad, dude. It's like a downward spiral there. Right? Yeah, that's no good. It's so funny. It's all coming back to me now. Ooh, it's probably a
Well,
reason I put a lid on it.
when did you come into Wissahickon? What was your elementary
So
school?
I was Bluebell.
Okay.
So part of the system. And when I left Bluebell and went into middle school, that's when my mom got her job at the library. So she left Prudential, I think that's where she was, and she decided, you know what, I got to keep an eye on my kids. Like I just am that kind of mom. So she got her job at the library and then straight through middle school into high school. And when we were in high school, she got a job in the IT department. So she could literally travel. I mean, Brad, like this is where some of my issues come from, right? Like she could travel between the schools. I think I snuck out of school twice, like cut class, and both times she happened to see me walking across the field to the parking lot because she was walking by a window. I mean, bad. It was like
Oh my
bad timing.
God. I was gonna say, was she like just stationed by those big bay windows, like at the end of the hall where
Yeah.
she could just look?
Yes. Yes, because that's where the library was. I
Yeah.
didn't realize like the back room to the library is like all those windows across the back. But yeah, I was in WIS for the entire school. I mean, gosh, and I never really branched out in terms of groups of kids that we hung out with or anything like that.
Who were you hanging
Just
out
me
with
and Jeff.
when? Yeah, so it was you and Jess. Was that like when you were? Well, see, so I know Jess went to Shady Grove because that's when I met Jess in fourth grade
Yeah.
at Shady Grove. So did you switch?
Yeah. No, no, no. I met Jess, gosh, I want to say it was middle school
Okay.
that Jess and I met. Um, yeah, and God, what was the guy's name? Do you remember it was Mr. G and Mr. D
Mr.
in
Goldberg or Mr. Delmuto?
that's the one. And I remember surviving that class with Jess, like having so many issues in that class, and her being like, "Shh, it's okay." Yeah, I think that was her. Oh my gosh, like I said, it's all so blurry. And then we went to Scott Beck. So Scott Beck and his friends and I were good friends. So
Okay.
Scott, Godey, Tui, kind of that group
Mhm.
I hung out with. But it was mainly Pat and I and Jess. That was it.
That's a threesome there.
Yeah, right. And I never did like a lot of sports, right? So I did track and cheerleading in school. And just never like hooked up with the kids that did it. And I didn't do team sports because I'm not a team player. And so in general, like it was just hard to fit in and make friends, like stick. I felt like I was a floater though. Like I could go sit with anybody, I could like have a
Yeah.
conversation with anybody, but like I wasn't invited to like the Friday night outs, right? Like I wasn't invited to like those, which was fine because again, I was too busy making out with Pat most of the
Yeah.
time. Wasn't missing much.
But you also were you said you were having events at your house anyway. You were having friends over, or
Yeah.
like your house would be the place where people would come. So would that be like a Friday or Saturday night?
Yeah, probably. Because we had the pool, there was like a game room upstairs. They did a good job of being the destination house. But yeah, I think we had people over on Fridays, and that was what it was. It was so low key. I'm really proud of my mom and dad. They like
They held it
took it
together.
down to like a safe level. Yeah. the chaos of childhood. They like, no problem. We got this. Must be nice.
What were you when you were a kid and like before, I guess, well, maybe even the time you're hanging out with Jess, but even before that, like what kind of stuff were you into growing up as a kid?
So my sister and I did martial arts. That was sort of like a outside of school thing. So we started that when we were pretty young and went straight through. I did it in college. When I came back from college, I did it for a little bit at the studio that we studied at. So that was a thing.
Were you doing Taekwondo?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one. Did you do that? I feel like
No.
we have that. Like
No, Ray did. Ray was a black belt in Taekwondo. Ray did karate and I think
yeah.
like did Junior Olympics and all that.
Wow, man,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah, we definitely didn't do that. And then we always had summer houses. So like during the summertime, we would go away. So we would go to the Poconos, we would come down to Ocean City, Maryland. So I wasn't even around for like the summer, portion of getting together with people.
That fits with
Um,
you not blending into like groups and stuff, right? You're being completely removed to build those
yeah,
bonds of
yeah.
going to
So
summer
it's not my
camp or
fault. Yeah. So it's not my fault, which is what we're agreeing on right now.
maybe your parents knew what they were doing, right? Let's remove her from the situation so she doesn't grow any real hard bonds with anyone and then make her start from
That's
scratch
right.
again in the next year.
Every year. Yeah. And then Nick and I played together a lot, like I was into reading and Nick was into stealing my books and hiding them somewhere in the house. So we always got along really well, Nick and I.
Are you guys 3 years
Um,
apart?
3 years apart. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And she's a pain in the ass the entire time we were growing up. And we're actually really close now, which is amazing. She's got a couple of kids. I got a couple of kids. It like worked out pretty well for us. All
Yeah.
that baby, playing we did as younger children.
Right.
It's
It paid
preparing
off.
us for later. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but we didn't do a lot outside of family time. We spent a lot of time together as a family. And then my parents divorced. So gosh, I think I was 16 when they divorced. So dad moved out. So now it was, seeing dad sometimes, seeing mom sometimes. And I guess that kept us a little bit busy.
Did you
I
live
don't
at
know. It
your,
wasn't.
what's that?
Yeah. At my mom's. Yeah.
You lived at your mom's. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. So same. Yeah. When you were, I guess when you went from like elementary school to middle school, do you remember that jump? I always look at that jump as being so hard. So the difference, I guess, between you and like, you don't really mention having like a group of friends, but my group of friends were kind of from the neighborhood. So like Ray Campion and Mike Mayall and the group of friends that spawned from like that Ambler crew. But then when you get to middle school, every year you're switching to a new pod. And I never really had classes or pods with friends. And so for me, it was really, really hard to make any connections. But for you, that's when you talked about you meet Jess. But in general, what was it like kind of jumping without really having a core group?
Sixth grade was really hard, like just one of those really difficult, I think like emotionally around that sixth grade time frame, like you just lose your shit, right? Oh, sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
Oh,
just
boy.
like, you're a mess. You're a mess. And so, how do you figure you out while you're trying to figure everybody else out so you can make friends, right? And then your teachers literally go from elementary school teachers, which are kind of like super babysitters, to like real teachers where you're starting to have these like big projects. And I definitely was not good at school in the beginning, like
Really?
that time frame. Oh my gosh, I struggled in reading. I really struggled in math and science. And so getting embarrassed in class just compounds like all of that, angst
The
during that
reading
time
aloud,
period.
like why don't you pick Jen? Why don't you pick up from page 26, paragraph 2, and now
Yeah.
everyone's looking at you?
Yeah. And it's some like crazy SAT word that's like 12 syllables long that you have to then sound out like a moron. Yeah, it's great. Really great for confidence. It is utter torture to kids, and it should never be done. It should be outlawed, in my opinion. But so we lived on a 4-lane highway. So you know what William Penn Inn is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so 202 and Summitown Pike is the William Penn Inn. We lived on that 4-lane highway, so we were not a neighborhood.
Oh,
So there
wow.
was no like, riding your bike or like walking down the street. Somebody's house. Like we didn't like walking across the street to get the mail was, taking your life in your hands. But I had Jeff Marsico behind me.
I was going to say, Jeff did the podcast last month and he talked about living right there.
Yeah. So Jeff lived behind me. And then next to us were, started with an A. Did he say who it was? Austins. Do you remember the Austins?
No.
Tim, Andrew, and Vicky Austin.
No, these are new names.
They were in Wissahickon for a little bit. I want to say they were pulled out and put back in a couple of times.
Okay.
But we would go over their house and hang out. We had this like cutout in the fence, like you think your mom and dad don't know about, and you like scooch under the fence to like go hang out. And then of course you find out 15 years later, they knew all along where you were because,
they let you do it.
It's
the one thing they were letting you do.
I know, letting me do. She quit her job to go to high school with me. Like she definitely knew there was a hole in the fence.
Yeah, she goes, she's climbing under a hole in the fence like the dog. I've got to work where she's going to school.
Look at this kid. Yeah. I don't blame her. But we would hang out with them every once in a while. But we all had the same problem. We were like no neighborhood kids, like those kids.
Yeah, I growing up in Ambler, I really didn't realize it until I started talking to other people who grew up kind of in that area. And it was always like, so many of their stories are my parents would drive me to so-and-so's house, or so-and-so would drive them to our house. And my social world, living in South Ambler was walking down the street to so-and-so's house, or playing in the street, or playing in the abandoned grass lot down the street where we all played football and, got tackled on the tree stumps, or, we walked to our bus stop and we had Butler Pike as like our main drag, and all sidewalks and shops. And, and then like, it's just all very residential, and we could ride our bikes and really do anything that we wanted outside until the street light came on. So
Yeah.
that was so much of my social world, which is interesting, like that you didn't have a big group, because it is all kind of like you have to really initiate it versus your parents say you have to go outside and play. Like you have to make friends, you
Right.
have to do something. So, all right, I'll put the Nintendo down and go walk outside and, play
Yes.
football with people. And it was very forced, and I don't know. I still crave that to this day. Like I always have problems with like these communities where like there's no one outside and no one's
I
having
know.
fun, because it just makes me think that I would never have friends in this era.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. 100%. But the kids that had neighborhoods, I was always jealous of. Amy Jaskowiak and I hung out for a little while, a couple of years. We were good friends. And across the street lived Tristan Goodell.
Yeah.
You know Tristan?
Yeah.
So we would go, my parents would drive me over there, right? Drop me off. And I want to say that was a house that I was allowed to like stay overnight, maybe like 2 nights in a row or something. And it was like mind blowing. Like we would go out front and like climb the tree, and like Tristan would be there and be like, whoa, yet another friend. Like, this is incredible. We're like multiplying friends because we live in a neighborhood. This is so cool. We used to go over and do, oh my gosh, I can't believe I remember this. Do you remember Ace of Base?
Oh, of course. The Sign, All That She
The
Wants.
Sign. Yeah. Whatever one was about the fox, something like shooting the fox or I don't know, whatever it was. We like learned this dance, and we were like, let's go show Tristan the dance. So we like went over to his house and like showed him the dance. It was so amazing and very different than what we did at my house, right? We would like watch ourselves in the mirror dancing around. Yeah, it was a good time. The neighborhoods are something to be said. We actually moved when my husband and I got together. We bought a house. He didn't grow up in a neighborhood either. We bought a house in a neighborhood, like acre plots, right? There were like, I don't know, 30 houses or something. And we thought like, this is going to be it. We're going to like just grow as people and find so much value out of like our day by like waving to the neighbors or like, hey, you want me to pull your trash cans up for you? And we were there for like 8 years, and we're like, we need to get the hell out of here. There's like way too much responsibility to talk to people. You almost start to feel like obligated to remember people's names, and like I'm terrible at names. So
every time you go out, every time you go outside, no matter what the mood is, people want to wave. And yeah,
that's right.
I'm it's funny, given all the things that I already talked about. I live in the city. I live in South Philly, and I've been here for almost a decade now. And I'm the same way, where like I like being outside and I like waving to people and talking to people in the neighborhood. But then like there's other times when I come out my door and I go the opposite way, because I don't want anyone to see me. I don't want any, it's like I'm just trying to go to the Rite Aid real quick. I don't want anyone to like, I don't want to socialize. And so I just turn my back and go the quiet way.
Yeah. Okay, so if you've been there for a decade, you've now seen like little kids like grow up, right? Like grow into like maybe young teens. Don't they all look like they're 5? I feel like these kids nowadays that are supposed to be like teenagers look like they're so young.
So I live in a weird area where while I have neighbors, I don't really know them exactly, because I live in a shopping district.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's cool. It's very cool. So the people that I see more so are the workers, the people that like set up shops on the sidewalk, and people, like I live around butchers and pasta shops and stuff like. So the biggest thing for me, which this is sad considering like you're looking at such a human view of it, and I'm looking at like, boy, I don't remember what this shop used to be 6 years ago. What was this before it turned into a plant-based, cafe? What the hell did it used to be? Remember the homeless guy used to like sleep in the little corridor there? And like, those are the kind of like, as time goes by, things that go through my mind here.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I noticed, like in the neighborhood, we were there for 8 years. So, you saw these kids that were young when we moved in grow into these teenagers and are like graduating high school. And I look at them and I think, okay, first of all, I was way older than that when I graduated high school. You felt like you were 30 years old when you graduated high school, because you knew everything that there was. You had your life planned out, like you got this. Now I look at these kids and holy moly, they're so young, Brad. How do they go out and survive? They're like 2.
The biggest thing, I used to see a lot was going to festivals, and I had to stop going to the Made in America festival, which is the Jay-Z festival that happens at the art museum
Yeah.
every year. And I went like maybe the first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I had to stop going because one of the craziest things was that it was all kids, and everyone was, and that's where I really saw like how much older. And at that point I was probably 30, 31, 32.
Yeah.
Realized like how much older I was than all these other kids here who are getting shit faced on Budweiser tall boys because it's sponsored by
Yeah.
Budweiser. And it's when the cutoff shorts were really making a comeback where like the whole butt cheek is hanging out. And you look around and you just see these kids passed out in the grass, making out with their boyfriends. And you go, oh, this is the only way for them to get out of the house and kiss their boyfriends or girlfriends. And you're just like, I'm too fucking old to be here. Get me out of here. Get me out of here. Just lock in on Jay-Z. Just lock in on Jay-Z. Pay no attention to anything else going on. That's when I really started realizing like the difference in youth. And when I go back to like watching, I watch old wrestling. I'm a big wrestling fan. And so I go back and watch old wrestling from like right now, 1997 is what I'm watching.
Yeah.
And that was the start of high school. That was ninth grade. And I think back and I go, and I haven't seen this stuff since it aired. Since I think I'm 14 when this was coming out, like, and I can't even remember it. But when I think about when I would think about myself previously in high school, I thought I saw myself as like this big kid, 14 years old. I'm fucking grown. I know everything. I'm talking shit to this guy and to this guy and putting on this persona because I really thought I was like basically an adult. And when I think back now to if I were to look at a 14-year-old, like, man, get out of here. Like, you don't know anything.
Right. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. And it's amazing that like we've come as far as we have, knowing as little as we did. I mean, the world is extremely different now. So, I look at the kids nowadays and I wonder, how they're going to forge ahead, and gosh, we struggled with things because that's the era that we grew up in. They're going to struggle with different things. And, it'll be interesting to see how they turn out, how we turn out. I'm thinking about our kids right now. We're thinking about putting them in private school instead of public school. We went through public school. Look, we turned out fine.
More or less.
But public school's different now.
More or less.
It's perspective, right?
Yeah.
More or less, yeah. And I think to myself, gosh, like, do you want to protect them and put them in a bubble? Or do you want to like thrust them into it and like give them the scars, but like that eventually make them stronger, And I didn't go to private school. So I just have, the fluffy, it's a bubble type of, thought that maybe that's what it is. But gosh, I don't know how to guide kids through growing up.
Well, what do you think it was then about public school that gives you pause to let your kids go through that system?
Yeah. So the mask first thing, right? Like there's very little control. And the mask thing was a real challenge last year. My kids were kids that had like, they got really rough around the back of their ears. My youngest has some learning challenges. And so from a speech perspective, she was really inhibited in her speech therapy. She had trouble speaking to her teachers because she was masked, and nobody could see anything. And so it was a real challenge last year. They do sports. They had to wear masks while they were doing sports. My oldest had a couple of like overheating, spells, and it was a real challenge. And they're young, right? They're in kindergarten and second grade this year. So I wonder, gosh, do they have to wear masks again? Another year of this, are we stinting their education opportunity? Are we stinting their personal growth or emotional growth? There were no friends made last year because they were 6 feet apart. They weren't allowed to play on the playground together. And we live in Tinicum. So have you ever heard of Tinicum?
No.
That's way up there. So we go to this tiny little school. There's like, 15 people in their class, but half of them were virtual last year. So it was just a really hard year. And so my understanding is that private schools have more flexibility. They don't necessarily have to follow state rules when it comes to the mask mandates.
Sure.
And so the flexibility there, I think is important. I've been doing some reading on how we learn as humans, right? And sort of why people have great memories and why people have really bad memories. And my understanding is that you have to be taught how to learn. You actually have to be taught how to memorize versus just putting flashcards in front of somebody and saying, learn this word, right? And I don't think public school teaches how to learn. I think they teach memorization. And so some of these private schools have very specific curriculum that is based on how to learn methodologies for, they use all kinds of fancy names for it, and so my kids are young, like, gosh, don't I want to teach them how to learn versus memorization? So a couple of things that we're weighing out here. Tell me your thoughts, because I just got like a big thing from you. Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, one of the big things for me, like the themes of the show, besides, with regrets as far as not dating, not getting to go to parties, is the fact that I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to learn. And when I think back to how classes were taught, so many of our classes were writing on the board or writing on the transparency sheet and literally just writing Roman numeral 1, European world history, letter A, this empire, number 1, this war, lowercase a, and you have just this giant notebook of these outline notes and the teacher's talking, but I'm focusing more on the obsession of getting my outline looking right. And sometimes I would like want to rewrite it so it will look better and like having the right pen or pencil and like making sure my notebook looked good, but I wasn't paying attention to the actual concepts that were being discussed or somewhat talked about, or really just more so recited. And when I meet people who are very academic, the Lizzie Blacks and the Paige Millers and people like that, one of the biggest things that I would ask them is, how did you study? What was the method? Compound that with the fact that my friends were not very academic first students. A lot of my friends, especially coming through high school, work with their hands, went to tech school. So they left the school halfway through the day and were doing like trade stuff. And I was the one that was like, oh, well, I have to go to college. That's what's in my head. And so I was taking classes all day long, and I didn't have anyone to like call up. And because the answer with a lot of people is like, oh, well, we had study groups, we would hang out, we would like learn this stuff, and we would do it for hours. And I didn't have anyone to like help instill that, nor did I have like a competitive nature to be like, oh, you got an A in that, I've got to get better, or can you help me get better? That was just like, whatever, what class are you in? You got a C? Yeah, I got a B minus. Like, we made it, that.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like the ability, just memorizing, not only I didn't have the want to memorize, nor did I have the skill to ever learn. Whereas now I almost wish I could go back and take some of those classes again, because I feel like I would retain the information so much better.
Yes. I mean, and let's be honest, are we ever going to have to know, complex trig? Probably not, because I'm going to have an iPhone probably embedded in my head at some point in my life. But the reality is, like, there's so much aside from the actual material that builds confidence in school. And I think that confidence is the foundation of later success, right? Like, you deal with some really difficult things after school. And the whole point of school is to lay the foundation of how you approach a problem, right? How do you work through a problem or plan the problem, right? And then, like, once you solve that problem, what happens next? Like, is there a follow-up? Is there follow through? Like, is there a next step that you're then planning for? Like, that's sort of how I see school. It's how I see being a parent too, right? My job is to prepare these kids to be functioning members of society, not to make sure that they, remember trig. It's just not that. And so if I could go back, like you, teach myself how to learn, it wouldn't necessarily be get the A, but it would be to have the confidence to take the test so that no matter what grade I had, I was happy with it, right? That's what you want. Like, I want to like build myself up in high school, so it didn't take so freaking long after high school to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just like teaching you how to deal with things, once you get home, and just it kind of all trickles down. I never really learned a lot of problem solving skills, and maybe that's things that your parents teach you. And I just, I missed out on maybe that aspect from my mom, and definitely from my dad. But I remember just like everything was like, wait till the last minute. don't worry about it till it's due, the anxiety and panic of, oh my God, that's next period. And that was with everything in life, that I was doing, from doing like musicals and not working on choreography or whatever, and not doing homework while I was in rehearsal, and then having to do it at like 9-10 o'clock when I got home, and then just going screw it, and then just not doing it. And then the end of the marking period comes and you're like, shit, I might have a C or D if I don't go talk to this teacher and like figure this out. Like just problem solving in life in general, I felt like I was out to lunch. And maybe that's more of a kid thing. Kids are always in a fog and a daze. But again, I thought I had me figured out back then.
Yes. 100%. And what about like even the social aspect, right? Like the social piece of school. Like I almost, nowadays you see teachers stepping in very quickly. You see parents stepping in very quickly to like solve a problem for kids. Like I felt like when we were in high school, like you fought that shit out. Like you figured it out. You cried in school. You got embarrassed. Sometimes you got tripped in the hallway. Sometimes you got your finger smashed. Like it is what it is, but you learn from that. You learn how to face adversity, or you try to learn from it, right? Like you gotta be like the shit some days, and it just is what it is, so that later in life, like, you know how to be the dog, right? Like it is.
I learned like how I get some flack a lot of times on this show because I think I'm harder on myself than people remember. And so I'm always like, oh, I had these problems and I had these problems. And people are like, dude, you did, like, I didn't think that about you, or no one thought that about you. And it's like, okay, like 20 years later, it's all nice. But like, I remember back then, like I had issues with kids and stuff, but like, I didn't feel like I had those tools to navigate through until after the fact. And I felt the effects of, being an abrasive kid. I saw other people that I wasn't connected to have like bad outcomes. Like, this is so random, but I'll never forget watching an episode of Real World in Austin right after like high school. And there was a kid who got in a bar fight on the show and he breaks his cheekbone. And that was the moment that I realized, like, oh my God, we're like grown men now. It's not like, getting a fight with RJ Smythe in the bathroom and he's going to like try and punch you and you're like, oh, whatever. Like if a 19, 20-year-old punches you in a fight, you might break your face. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be. And so it was like, so how do you get away from that? It's like, oh, you just can't engage. You just can't engage because you don't know where it will lead. You have to be able to remove yourself and just, no matter who cares how embarrassing it is? I don't want to have a broken face for 6 months. Like, you have to do everything you can to just remove yourself. And I falter at times like that, but it took me seeing the effects, or like you could go to jail for doing something, or it took seeing what the effects happen as an adult once you turn 18 and how bad that can get for me to go, oh, I don't want to go all the way in that direction. Even though I'm not a badass, I could put myself in situations where I can be perceived as putting off that bravado like a peacock and, oh, come try me, motherfucker. And that was not what I wanted for an outcome.
Right. It's your bullseye right on your cheek right there. You act like that, right?
It's so messed up that stays with me.
Yeah, no, it's good. This is your moneymaker. You can't be messing with that. Yeah, no, I know it. It's amazing. Go ahead.
Well, what's it like for like a girl, like did you deal with, you talked about like being tripped in the hall or things like that. Like, are there, like, what kind of conflicts did you have just interacting in school?
Yeah. So, I think the most physical that it ever got, and this is like nothing, so don't be on the edge of your seat here, but for me, it was like, right. I was at the lunch table sitting next to, I don't know, somebody. And do we name names? Like, can I name names here? Yeah.
So the rule I always like to give, like, where I try and be fair to everyone. If it's your story and it happened to you, say whatever name you want. It's your memory. If it's like, oh, I remember this happened to so-and-so. If it's kind of unsavory, I might take it out, or I might take the name out just so that person's like, hey, I wish my story wasn't put out there. But if it happened to you, feel free.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So sitting at the lunch table and we were like all packed in, right? And I don't know who I was sitting next to, but Carolyn Rossler wanted my spot. And she came over and said something like, get out of my spot or move over. And I said, no. And she pulled my hair, but like yanked my hair, but like backwards, like, and so there's that moment, Brad, right? Where you're, first of all, I was immediately in tears, right? Like I am so like upset about what happened. And then it's the embarrassment, right? So everybody saw it happen. Everybody saw my hair get yanked back. And so then number three is, what the hell do you do? Like, you know, I'm not a conflict person. I did take martial arts, but like, what do I do? What's the appropriate? I don't want to get in trouble. So there's this like compounding effect, right? Where as a kid, it almost is overwhelming. And I left. I got off the table, left. She sat down in my spot, and I went up to the library to my mom. I was like, Mom, this is what happened. And God love her. She says, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, will you go talk to her? And she said, no, you go talk to her. And I thought, oh man, like this is it. Like this is the moment, right? The learning moment. What do you mean? If you're not going to do it for me and I don't want to be treated like that, I guess I got to go say something, you know? And the whole way downstairs, I was like rehearsing, you know, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Should I pull her hair back? Should I push her? Should I put her head in her food? Like, what's the best way to do this?
Yeah.
Should I just pick up my tray and go somewhere else, you know, and remove myself from the situation? I tapped her on the shoulder and said, don't ever touch me again. That was my spot. And I walked away and I thought, okay, at least I stood up for myself. And it was the first time, Brad, that I thought, okay, nothing bad happened. Nobody laughed at me. She didn't come after me. And it's that like tiny little incremental win that started to like build some confidence. But, you know, a girl in high school doesn't get into a fist fight very often. It's more that passive aggressive underlying, like, oh, her jeans are not cute, you know, or I did a bunch of sports in school, but I always felt like I was chubby, you know? So every time somebody said something about my outfit or about the way that I looked, it always came back to the insecurities that I had.
Yeah.
It's almost as a girl, it's the internal fight that you have with yourself and, you know, the challenges that you're trying to overcome that high school, you know, layers on, right? Like they're triggers around you, but it's your issues that, at least for me, were probably the biggest to overcome. Not necessarily because I was a girl, but I didn't hang out much, right? So
I hear that a lot, like and that's why I'm always so curious with girls, like what that's like, because for me, it was so much more your first situation that you mentioned where a confrontation, you know, arises and it escalates like that. And
yeah,
exactly the steps that exactly like every stage you talk about, right? Of like that that shock, and then like realizing you've been like attacked and you almost like you want to start crying, and then you realize everyone's looking, everyone saw it. And I think where I differ is you took a pause. I wouldn't take a pause. I would see everyone looking like, what are you going to do? And I would feel that pressure to, all right, what do you want to do? And now next thing you know, I'm punching Mike Mickles in the middle of science class, and he's,
Mike
and he's
my
making,
gosh, yeah,
and he's making my jaw crack for the rest of my life. It's like,
oh my gosh. Oh
like
my
those,
gosh.
I never had that ability to take that pause and figure it out. And I definitely wouldn't have, I never even had those conversations with like my mom to say like, here's what you need to do. And I would just like, and maybe it's because it's like it's more of like that son mother relationship is very different than like, I think a daughter mother.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would meet aggression with aggression. And I could see myself just being like, I can't walk down to that girl who just pulled my hair, or in my case, that guy that just pushed me out of my seat, and tap him and stand my ground, because in my mind, we're going to fight at that moment.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have to tell you something though. I definitely am jealous of the people that don't have to stop and think about a situation, for better or worse. I have to stop and like, I got to think through a situation before I act, or I bite my tongue when I'm trying to say something smart ass to someone. Like it just comes off as like really bad. I'm always better after the fact. I'm jealous of the people. My husband's like that. He like out of the gate knows exactly what to say. He's always got the retort. Like he's always got like, and I've always thought to myself, gosh, I wish I could just react the right way or the wrong way. Like, I wish I could, like, you know, not have to run upstairs to like think about it before I come downstairs and, you know, stand my ground. Like, why can't I do that right away? I don't know.
It has pluses and minuses. You have to be instinctive, and I think with low stakes, I'm very good with that. Or in helping, if someone calls me with a problem, I'm really good at like asking them. And I think it's because like I do, probably because like I do video and like talk to like clients and like, okay, what are your pains and what are you
Yeah.
trying to do and what do you want to get out there? Who do you want to see these things and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And I can, so if someone calls me, hey, this just happened. All right, like where did it happen? Like what is your problem here? What's the
Yeah.
best thing that you're hoping for? Here's how I would go about it, or here's
Yeah.
3 other options.
Right.
It's rare I can do that for myself in a logical sense. Like another thing that people always tell me when I'm talking about things on the podcast, and usually like in the form of dating, and is that I overthink everything, because now I do try and weigh my options, and I do try and like put myself in the best light or the best position to get something done. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like you said, you want to just have that instinctive response or be able to handle it a little bit more naturally than having to like pre-program your steps out. And I
Yes.
fall into that much more now as an adult when it has to do specifically with me, and especially when it's like medium to high stakes. And I kind
Yes.
of regret that now, but knowing how I used to react and knowing how I can react sometimes, and work emails are like one of those things where like I would get, I'm not in the corporate world right now because I realized how much I don't belong. But man, when I was in an office and I was on, if you sent an email to, and I was on it, like that
Yeah.
reply all was like the worst thing in the world for me, because I would read something and go, I feel like we already talked about this. I need to let them know that they're like letting me down as a team member,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like
Oh
I'm
my
disappointed in their lack of comprehension. And I would like start to write out the email, and I'm looking at this and I would go, this ain't the one to send, Brad. Just you
God.
already wrote it, delete it. Or I would send it to like one person that was a support member, and I would say,
Yeah.
hey, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Can you just like it's in Brad speak. Can you clean it up and send it out?
Yeah. Look at you growing up. Good for you.
But that's after years of realizing that, hey, people find you somewhat abrasive from time to time. Like, really? Me? I just told the guy to go fuck himself. What's you can't handle that?
Oh, what? Come on. God.
But my parents were like abrasive people. My dad was a very aggressive person. My mom's a
Yeah.
yeller. Like I come from a family of yellers, so it's almost like you scream and you yell, and that's how
Yeah.
you like hurt someone's feelings, and then you get over it. That's what I was so used to. So it's like that was like yesterday. Isn't he over that? Like, let's go. Let's make money. Let's do
Yeah.
that.
Yes, yes. Isn't it amazing? Like, and again, I harbor feelings. That's something that like I'm working on to like just get over yourself, Jen, because everybody else already is. But that is something that's really hard to do. And it's, again, like, let's go back to high school. Like, gosh, I remember like I can physically feel like the belly clenching that happens when you said something really fucking stupid in class, right? Like, and you're immediately like, oh gosh, I'm never going to forget this moment. 20 years later, I can still feel the embarrassment. I can still start to sweat. Like, it's like
I was gonna say
something
start
really
sweating.
bad. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't ever go away, And those are the foundations. Like, those are the foundations that, I don't know, make us better or worse growing up, right?
Well, we definitely remember and hopefully learn from them.
Spoken like a true guidance counselor right there. Learn from your mistakes.
Learn from your mistakes. You said that you started off not being like a great student, but you got better. What was your, like in school, what was your subject or your favorite teacher, or what were you really like kind of honing in on or doing really well with?
Gosh, I just remember school being so difficult. Mr. Landis in middle school, right, for science,
Yeah.
I left his class and I always thought to myself, this is the most interesting subject I've ever had. Like, this is really, really interesting. And so for a long time, I wanted to be a biologist until I realized how much schooling that requires. And no, that's not what I do today. Suffice to say. So I was never good at science or math. ever. English in general, I'm a much better reader, so I'm a good reader. I really enjoy writing. So from a architectural perspective, like sentence structure and learning the names of the words and all that stuff, I was terrible at, but I could write a story, and I could write pretty well. I could read pretty well, comprehend. So I would say from a school perspective, reading and writing was probably something that I was good at. The rest of it just sucked. The rest of it was so hard. Like, remember we had to memorize the to be or not to be soliloquy? I don't even know. It was like 7th grade or 8th grade, like the
No.
entire freaking paragraph.
Like
it was
Romeo
this
and
much
Juliet?
Yeah, you were probably absent that day or that week. But yeah.
Well, was that off of
memorize
like the
whole-
craze? Was that off of the craze of the Leo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet that like was probably just coming out?
I'm sure it was. If I was that teacher, I would totally be obsessed with that movie at the time. So I understand if that was the case.
I feel
At
like
least
that was
memorize this time paragraph.
I feel like that was
Go ahead.
definitely like the end of the school year video that like
Yeah.
last day. That's with I feel like we would watch The Sandlot or Romeo and Juliet.
Yes. And they could not be more different. Like the gunfighting and the killing and the stabbing
Yes.
versus the Sandlot with the baseball.
Yes.
And the dog.
Yeah. But everyone liked the kid in
Yeah.
that. Everyone liked the Jet, Vinny the Jet. Everyone liked the star player. I remember that being like a switch where it's like, oh, I thought we're all watching this funny movie, and then that kid comes on and everyone's like, ooh, and I was like, what are we?
Yeah.
Are we paying attention to different stuff now? What happened?
What are we doing? What are we doing now? Yeah, yeah. Oh man, movie days were the best. I wish we had movie days at work.
Yes.
That'd be pretty yay. And I guess we could probably just take some time off, but it just doesn't work like that anymore, Movie days are so good because you could do whatever. It wasn't just about watching the movie, right? Like you could also pass notes or talk to your buddy or
Yeah, but I look at those as like just the wasteful days. Those are the type of things I look at and I would just go like, man, so much of school was arbitrary and wasteful that I almost like resent it taking my time back then.
Yeah. Yes.
When did you and Pat start dating?
Jeez Louise. I want to say it was in middle school.
Wow.
Maybe 8th grade. And he called me. I don't even know how he got my number, but he called me and it was like an old. That's right. The school directory. Jeez, they don't even do those anymore.
No, because kids are creeps now.
The school directory, dude. I have not thought about that like weird bound. Like, oh yeah, that was so fun. So I'm upstairs in the bedroom and it's the phone that like, it's like the cordless, zoop, like one of those guys way back then. And he says, is Jenny there? And I remember going, yeah, this is Jenny. And he's like, it's Pat Emery. I wanted to know if you wanted to hang out. And I'm like, yeah, like, didn't get that it was a date. Yeah. Oh yeah, that sounds good. I think I had to ask my mom, but I wrote down his name. I wrote down his phone number. And that was it. The rest was history. I think we got together for like a movie or pizza and then for the rest of high school.
Do you remember like
middle school through?
Yeah. Do you remember like what made it so I guess permanent? Because in middle school especially, and even the beginning parts of high school, a lot of kids have talked about classmates who were kids then talk about like the maturity level and not being able to, I was certainly at that point, not being ready to date, not being able to date. But if they were even in a situation to date, the relationship was so early stages of just like locker boyfriend and girlfriends. Like I said, oh, I dated so-and-so and so-and-so, but it wasn't real. It's like, so what does that mean? Well, in between periods, we would like see each other at our lockers and like, but then I would go home and not talk to anybody. Like what made it so much different that you guys actually it was like a real relationship and you actually ended up staying together through all of high school?
So I've never really thought about it, but if I had to right now, I think Pat had the same, I'm not going to call it friendship challenges, but sort of the same mentality that I had where he didn't have a strong group of guys that he hung out with. And so would have pulled him away from, a monogamous relationship. my parents thought very highly of his parents, and I think vice versa. So I think the level of respect that parents have for each other makes it easier to, attend your child to one or the other households. It's just safe.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and this is not a knock on Pat at all, my level of insecurity probably made it so I wasn't looking, or I didn't think that there'd be an opportunity to find another boyfriend if I had changed my mind about being in a relationship with him. Um, I think we had some like big firsts together, if you will. Right. And so like a lot of those like are, foundational like building and so super fun. And you wonder if anybody else knows how to do those things. So you're like, well, I just better stay with this one because he knows how to do it.
Yeah.
um, and for a long time, like we just were friends, like we did everything together. And so we continued to like build a foundation of friendship along with relationship. And it wasn't until about we started planning for college. So his mom and dad were very academic, both teachers. My parents, like you, nobody in my family had ever gone to college before. So I remember saying to my mom, as we were talking about colleges and, where do I apply? Like, I don't even know what I want to do. Like, where do I apply? And she's like, got me, and how many should I apply to? I don't know, and I remember saying to her, I wish you were like Pat's parents. Like you could at least like guide me through this. Like I'm going to go talk to them. And when I tried to do that, like they didn't know who I was. So, like they didn't know me like my mom would have. And so the type of guidance that I got from them was very much focused on Pat. And so Pat had this plan and Pat had like where he was going to go and what he was going to do. And I almost started to feel like I was burdening him, or I was going to like anchor him down. And so like there's just this divide that started, at least for me, like it started to feel that way. And I think maturity plays into it as well, right? Like we grew up together. And so for a long time we were going like this together, but it's all of a sudden, you start to mature in different ways. And about, I think it was senior year, right? Because we were homecoming together, whatever that was about the time where we started splitting up. And I think he said that he had a crush on somebody else, or I heard that he had a crush on somebody else. And I was like, oh, devastated. And so that was like the end of that. But you know what? I haven't stayed in touch with him. I've only seen him on Facebook, and it's one of those like fond memory type of relationships, right? And friendships too. I don't see Jess Lauer as much as I wish I saw her. We're just distance wise, very different, different places. Like Scott Beck, Godey and Ryan Dunn and I every once in a while have this like text string going. I miss all those people. They were like such foundational relationships, but it's okay that we're not around each other anymore. Do you feel like that? Like it's okay, even though you were great friends then, it's okay like that you don't see each other now.
Part of like this show being, we weren't friends in high school is that I'm talking to people that I consider that I wasn't friends with. And kind of the rules of that is like, we couldn't have known each other's parents or been to each other's houses. And that's so many people. But for the ones that I do consider myself friends with and haven't had like some sort of falling out or specific reason why we don't talk, I think I do often still struggle with like that definition of friends. And I wish that we were involved in each other's lives more, or I wish that, I wish that we kept in touch in more than text messages and those things. But then there's also like the reality of, maturity and you can't hold on to keeping things the exact same, because it will kind of hold you back at times if you hold on to those types of things. So that's something like with just getting older. I think I've come to like, I've always realized it, but I think I've come to accept and be okay with it a little bit more.
Yeah, agreed. And then, the new friends, right? There's always new people in your life that are coming and going. And, it's always interesting when we meet somebody, though. I still think to myself, gosh, he acts just like so-and-so. You know what I mean? Like you always see like the traits. There must only be so many types of people out there, because how often do you bump into someone and you're like, oh, snap. Like that is such, the way that my whatever used to do it. It's just, It's amazing.
You ever like
It's
replace
amazing.
them as like that type of personality in your life? Just like, oh, they remind me of this person. So I'm going to keep hanging out with them because like, I like this, like they gave me that feeling that this person used to give. And like, great.
That's
Now I
right.
got that
That's
back in
right.
my life.
Yeah, yeah. You're my Justin. Like,
Yeah.
this is like Maryland Justin, not Pennsylvania
Yeah.
Justin. Like it's the yeah. Those poor people. Yeah. I wonder who I am for somebody.
Mm,
Because you're that for somebody, right?
yes.
Are you like the pain in the ass, like Pennsylvania Brad? Or are you like the Brad they always wanted in their life in Pennsylvania?
I often get that I'm like I think I'm like the loud, funny guy to a lot of people. I often get that I'm like, I remind them of like their nephew. Like that's what like
Oh
older
yeah.
people always like, oh, you remind me you're exactly like my nephew so and so. And it's like, oh, really?
Oh, oh, that means that's sweet. I mean, it's better than like, you're like my pain in the ass boss. Like
Yeah.
that's not what you want to hear
No,
from new friends.
no. You mentioned college. So what were and you had said that you were really good at reading and writing. What did you think that you were going to do as you're like struggling to figure out this path of like getting out of high school? What did you think you were destined to do in 11th, 12th grade as you're trying to figure that out?
Go to college. I had no plan other than go to college because I was told that I need to go to college. And so I applied to, I think, 2 schools.
Yeah.
That's it.
Which
And
ones?
Salisbury and Columbia. I got into both. I was told by my mom, though, that I had what did you call it? A 5-hour radius around our house that I could go to college in. And Salisbury was closer to where my new boyfriend at the time lived. He lived in Jacksonville, North Carolina. He was in the Marine Corps stationed down there.
Oh,
So
wow.
I obviously went to Salisbury because it was closer to him.
Mm.
And I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life. So whatever. And we had a house down here in Maryland. So after 2 years, it would have been in-state tuition. So every weekend, I drove down to Jacksonville, North Carolina to see him. So it's like a 9-hour drive every weekend back and forth.
Wow.
This is how I stayed out of trouble in college.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, took the first 2 years of gen eds, waited the 2 years to declare a major, and I did business because it was super generic. Still didn't know what I wanted to do, and business marketing. And at that time, they'd opened, I forget exactly what it was called, the school, but the newest major was conflict analysis, dispute resolution. It was basically mediation. And so I decided to double major. And so business marketing and then CADR. And then I minored in photography because it was fun. And
Wow. That's a very busy world, very busy life.
yeah, it's one of
Double
those like,
major, minor, full-time
it sounds
boyfriend.
it sounds so good, right? And it was what happened to me versus like what I planned for, which is sort of the story of my life. So get out of college, right? Still don't know what I want to do. Was looking in the papers because at the time there were still papers and Indeed.com. And so Salisbury is on the eastern shore of Maryland. So it's like way down there. It borders Delaware. So lower Delaware, there was a company called Adecco, which is a temporary staffing firm. And so I saw something in the paper for some sort of business management, or maybe it was a manager of something job. And I went to Adecco to interview for this job, walked in, tiny little room. I'm in there with the manager of Adecco. We're going through this interview and she goes, if you want it, the position is yours. And I said, oh, well, we haven't really talked about the position. And she said, we've been talking about it. And Brad, what it was a office manager job for Adecco. So she thought I was interviewing for a job description that I didn't know was available. I thought I was interviewing for this job over here, but she had given me this role instead. And I was thinking to myself, okay, at least it's a job. And it's now 5 months after I've graduated college. I got to get some shit going here. So started the job there, met some folks from Verizon Wireless who I was hiring temporary, workers for, the people that would sign you in, would you like a new phone or would you like to add a line? Like those guys.
Yeah.
Hired those people. And I was actually also hiring, this is gross, Purdue. So this is like the chicken capital of the world down here.
Okay.
Purdue's here, Mount Air's here, Allen's is here. And I used to hire chicken catchers and bone pickers. So yeah, the people that go into the chicken coop and like grab the chickens and stuff them into so gross.
Wow.
And then the people that like sit on the line and pick bones, I hired those people for Purdue. So there I am at this temp staffing firm. I've got a couple of clients doing this, that, and the other. And Verizon Wireless called and said, do you want to work here? Would you like to, sell phones? And I thought, well, sure, like something different than this. So went over there. It was my first sales job and it was mission based. And I realized in sales, the harder you work, the more you get paid. And so that was like this interesting concept. I'm a hard worker. And if I work just a little bit harder than everybody else, then I start to get like kickers, right? Then you start to make more money. And so then you get to like rise up the ranks. And so was at Verizon for a little while, decided to do outside sales because retail sucks. Started working for Staples. They called me, Staples contract division. So paper clips and Post-it notes, baby. And was very successful in that role.
So like Dunder Mifflin?
Yeah, totally. Exactly like that.
You're like competitor to Dunder Mifflin.
Weird boss and everything. Yeah, totally. And I was on the Eastern Shore. So everybody down here is like, nobody comes down here. Right? Like this is not where big businesses go to thrive, but there are lots of small businesses here. And so it was a fairly kind of green landscape for sales. And so did really well here. I left there. And for the last, since graduating, I've been in sales. And so always done outside sales. And so I've been in this business to business sales role for a couple of different companies. I'm in healthcare software now.
Oh, wow.
It's not what I went to college for. It's not what I ever would have expected. Procrastinator, right? And so sales is super organized. You got to stay on top of your shit. You got to stay on top of your customers and your prospects, and managed a couple of salespeople for a little while, and that's for the birds. I mean, I got my own problems, right? I don't need anybody else's.
Yeah. Everyone's a cowboy out on the road.
Oh God. Yeah. So, and that's it. And, I look back in my life and I think, geez, Louise, this is never where I expected to end up ever. But to your point, it's a happy place. Knock on wood.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting that it took you like that whole path. And it sounds like your skill set is more of like just communication. Like that's like,
yeah, I would say the conflict resolution piece is definitely helpful, right? Those like interpersonal skills, yet a subject that should be in school as well, in my opinion. But that's what we all have to be able to do, right? Like not be afraid of hard conversations, not avoid conflict. And sales is all conflict, right? Like you got to align your products. People don't want to talk to you because you're a sleazy salesperson. Like, so you got to figure out how to get around that. It's just like any other discussion, right? It's like politics. Like people avoid talking about politics because it's uncomfortable. Well, it doesn't need to be uncomfortable, right? But we have to have the skills and the respect for each other, just like I have with buyers, right? Like to align or to at least have a conversation and walk away as friends. So I think, that definitely, to your point, is something that I feel like I've probably been good at for most of my life.
Yeah.
Avoiding conflict. And then actually learning how to go through conflict, right, in college.
But if you remember, like you talking about that issue with Carolyn and you getting that lesson right there and the conflict resolution and not backing down, but making it clear what your hard line is, what your standards are, and and leaving it at that and kind of, letting things go as they are. That's like the non-sell.
That's right. That is exactly. There's a book called that. No, there should be at least. And it's stuff that like, I don't know how your mentality is, but I like this idea of going with the flow, right? Like through life. And so when I mentioned it's things that have happened to me,
right?
Maybe called like doors open, right? Like open doors, you walk through the open door. If you're getting beat over the head by life, it may mean you're on the wrong path, right? Like, so make a different choice. right? And so these are all choices that sort of put themselves in front of me, I feel like. And I took the opportunity to walk through that door to like follow that. I've
Mm,
never been a planner. Every plan I think I've ever had, just I probably procrastinated and didn't get it done.
interesting.
Yeah, but the rest of it kind of just went with the flow,
Yeah.
Not that it was easy, because I don't think anything in life worth having is easy, but you work for it. I don't know. What about you? Like, did you go with the flow to get where you are?
I guess so. You know, I went to Monco after high school, and I remember not really knowing what I was going to do. I thought I was prior to senior year, I thought I was going to go to college to do theater. I
Okay.
thought I was going to like I'd spent like my whole childhood, trying to be an actor and doing
Yeah.
musicals throughout middle school and high school, and
Yeah.
I was trying to be like a child actor with like a manager when I was, from the time I was like 11
Yeah.
through middle school, and then so that's what I thought it was. That's what I thought my skill set was, and then I quit the high school musical in senior year. I quit My Fair Lady before it really got going,
Hmm.
and I that kind of ruined like, okay, well, you're not going to theater. But I joined TV Lab, and I really fell in love with like the camera and directing. And, at the time was like Tom Green was a thing and Jackass was becoming a thing. And kind of like this content, this self content creation where you own the content. And before YouTube started, you own the
Yeah.
content, you create the content, and then you just need to find a place to put it out. And at that time it was like, well, we have the TV network, we had the
Yeah.
closed caption Mosaic channel. And I thought that would be like I thought that was my outlet at the time. And so harnessing that became much more of my interest than singing, dancing on stage. So when I went to Monco, I did video. I was a communications major, and I did video, and I also started doing radio on the college
Hmm.
radio there. And I was talking wrestling
Yeah.
on college radio and shooting, all different types of stuff for video on campus, and running like the closed caption TV show that ran on campus, and
Yeah.
organizing, and to the point when I got to Temple, after I did a quarter transfer after my associates,
Yeah.
and went right into Temple, right into like all of my major. I didn't have any more core classes to take or prerequisites. I didn't have to take English or math or anything. It was just, and most people had never touched a camera at that point because you
Huh.
have to wait till your junior year. But because I was at Monco, I had been using cameras for 2 years. So it was like, first step, it was like, no, I know what I'm doing. I know how to focus and zoom later. And I was
Yeah.
just like, I was off to the, off to the horses. I don't know what the saying is, but I was
Races.
off. Yeah, off to the races. I was off to the races with that. And so it was like it really clicked for me at that point. And I even had a sense of like storytelling and what my sense of humor was that, senior year, it's like, I want to shoot film. If I never do anything else in media, I was a film major at Temple, film and media arts. So like that was so I was taking like intense writing classes, but at the same time trying to learn everything all together. I was, taking editing classes, and at the same time in senior thesis for filmmaking. So I was shooting on 30 millimeter film, or Super 16, I think I was shooting on, and like had a cinematographer, and we had to take our film to NFL studios to be developed. And then we had to pay $200 an hour at Modern Film and Video in Center City to get it color corrected. And so like I'm fundraising, I'm sending letters to my grandfather's friends like, hey, you may remember me from 2 years ago when I was hanging out during the Kentucky Derby, and
Yeah.
I'm in college and I need money for this. And then people are sending in $50, $100, and you're putting that to your budget. And that's what I did senior year, to where it was like I shot this short film and like a pretty good story, and I won a screenwriting award. And after that, I accidentally, like things happen, I accidentally got a job working for the WWE, and
Wow.
yeah, like writing TV for World Wrestling Entertainment,
Oh
just
my
off of the fact that like I went to film school and had these skill sets. And after that was like a really like no man's land of like, okay, well, I've done that, what's next? And I wasn't a Hollywood person, wasn't an LA person. I tried it for like a summer, and I came
God. Yeah.
back like, no way. And it took me a while to like figure out, until I realized like all those things that I've been doing since high school, I still had all those skill sets, and
Yeah.
the same premise still existed. You just have to find an outlet for
Yeah.
your own content. And I mean, while I'm still doing video and audio and production for companies and businesses, here I am now creating my own content and just being so much more content with doing this than just like, you know, I've done the office thing where I'm just in an office making stuff for other people and having no outlet. But here I am now, probably at my happiest professionally doing this, spending way more hours on doing this than I am for like my clients that I do other stuff for. But it took me all this time to really kind of find this and go like, no, like this is how you start something. And, you know, Jeff Pan was very eye-opening, and like the step from 0 to 1 is the hardest.
Yes.
And it took me all this time of like trying and failing or trying, saying, oh, that's not really my fit. That's not really my culture, to just going like, no, you just need to do what the original passion was, creating content and finding a place to put it out. And now I'm doing it.
So how proud, like when you go through that whole, you know, history of your journey, like there's such pride. I mean, I can see it like as you talk about it, like, and humble, they're quite humble about it, but there's such pride in like what you've accomplished. Cause like you said, it is so hard to get yourself, you know, kind of aimed in the right direction, let alone stepping forward. Right. And you have to overcome some things. There's some challenges, that big challenges probably, that you've had to overcome. You've got to look back on that and feel like, damn, I am good.
You know what? There was a time when like when I left WWE, got fired from WWE, which I talk about in Ryan Dunn's podcast episode, that I felt like I peaked. That was it. I peaked. I was writing TV for a show that was getting millions of viewers a week. I was traveling the country in arenas with 8,000 people, you know, every day, drinking on the road with John Cena, and just like living, you know, getting picked up in limousines and flying on a private jet with Vince McMahon. And like, this was like, and then like you get fired and you're just like, well, that's it. Like maybe there's a retail job in my future. You know, that's really like, especially like going out to Hollywood. So I think I'm more proud that even through, and there were like hard times, really hard times where you're trying to figure it out. You know, years where you're trying to figure out and you remember what you were doing before. And that's why I say you feel like you peaked. But I'm proud that like you said, when things happen and you have kind of these, I'd had this idea for this podcast for like years, and not like this podcast has been like this mega success in the terms of like, I'm not WWE or anything like that, but like it's growing and I see the growth and the more people that find out, and no one listens to the podcast and goes, man, this thing sucks. And so I think, you know, the thing that I'm like most proud of is that like I kept honing my skills. I'm trying to make things better. My innovation is like at its highest right now, that it's, you know, the highest it's been since college. And I'm proudest that I haven't allowed my skills to atrophy. And I'm able to like, because when we were in college, digital didn't exist. Like I said, I shot my senior thesis on film. The other option was videotape. When I got out, when I came back from WWE, everything was on tiny little SD cards. Like this is how we shot everything. And now you just put it into the computer and you drag your video file. That didn't exist when I was in college at all. So it was like a whole new world, and it felt like collapsing. And now I feel like I'm actually a part of the content creation community. And that's what I think I'm proudest of, is that no matter what the level of success is, that I didn't allow myself to fall out. And now I'm actually able to like do stuff with it professionally and use this as like a side thing of like, oh, I do this regularly and I can do this for you over here. That's like what I think I'm proudest of.
Yeah. All right. So then when you say that you felt like you peaked, do you still feel like, knowing what you know now and the level of, let's call it, happiness that you have with what you do day to day now, do you still think that that was a peak? Was it yours? Was it somebody else's?
It was a peak, only because of what it is, right? It's $1 billion company, and no matter what little part I had in it, I still had some sort of a part in it for even as little time as I had, right? I was there for a year and a half, cup of coffee. But I still had a piece in it that like can't be taken away. And for someone that grew up watching wrestling, and you know, a bulk of my friends are wrestling fans, that's always something that it's like growing up in, like, if you and your friends were huge Disney fans and you like you animated the Lion King, or you know what I mean? Like you had a role in animation for the Lion King. It's like, you know, even if I don't do that anymore and I'm just drawing, you know, cancer cells for animation for a pharmaceutical company, I can still go back to that thing that I did 10 years ago and go, hey, you know, I that's me there on the screen, or I helped write that, or those are kind of the things that I feel like I don't know if I'll ever have anything like that again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't happy. That wasn't like a happy job. And the thing that I always remember, the biggest thing probably my parents instilled in me is to love what you do. And I didn't love that. I loved being able to tell people about it, but I'm so much more comfortable and just happy with what I'm doing right now. I still have bigger things and frustrations with myself where I say, I want to take this further. I want to do more with this. I'm not there yet. But I'm happiest, I think, with this. So it's double sworded when you say, like, did I peak? Professionally, I still think I did, but personal, professional, I guess, I still see now roads where I can reach higher. And maybe that will lead to something more braggadocious than, hey, I used to work for WWE.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. The successes that we have there, like, it feels like this, at least in my life, right? And there's like multiple peaks, you know, where you think almost like, actually, maybe they're more like shelves, right? Where like you thought you were going to go like really far, and then like that shit dropped off.
Just dropped off.
It's like gone, right? And like you're not, it's gone, you know? So as I look forward, I think to myself, all right, I'm on this path right now. It's a pretty good path, but there's no rhyme or reason to what the next 10 years, 20 years, hopefully 40, 50 years is going to bring, right? Because as good as I thought I had it then, and as bad as it could have been, you know, I mean, the future is, we're going to have to do this again, Brad. That's what I'm saying. We're going to have to do this again in 20 years. And you're going to be like, dude, how's that shelf? And I'm going to be like, it dropped off quick.
Stay tuned for the sequel episode in 2041 when we get back for a part 2.
God willing, we get there. Oh my goodness. Just a crazy world to look back and think we made it through celebrity deaths. We made it through 9/11. We made it through crazy presidents. Like, we are just headed for this pendulum swing.
Financial crashing.
Right. I mean, you know, and then all the personal things that happened, right? Like, you look back the last 20 years, you got all kinds of shit in there. You know, and it's a pendulum. So it's all the way over here now. It's got to swing back.
Well, you know, that's the thing, is when things are like, when you're in like a space like this, like I think like, okay, things aren't that bad. And I remember when I left WWE, I was like, what am I going to do? And as things weren't going the way I wanted in LA, you're just like, oh, this could be terrible. But now, like, that I'm on the other side, I often say to myself, like, I feel like I could get a job doing anything I wanted to do if I just like work on my resume and my reel and I just put it out. If I need to give this up and like go get a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 6 or whatever hours they work in offices nowadays, like, I feel like if I had to do that, I feel like I'm way more equipped today than I was 10 years ago when I was in Stamford, Connecticut.
100%. If I could have any job in the world, it would be, and I basically have it, it would be a professional interviewer. I love an interview, right? Like, it's the beginning of something amazing. You got to do all kinds of research. You got to put your makeup on. You got to like get yourself like psyched up for it, right? You get to like meet somebody new. There's like this verbal sparring that has to happen, which has to end in a laugh or you're not getting a job. You know, like, there's like so much that like goes into this interview. I absolutely love it. I guess it's basically sales, right? Because you're selling yourself in an interview. But yeah, I'm with you. You got to like take it all in, everything you learned, because it just makes you a little bit better.
And to be able to embrace that, to recognize that you do like that, and to embrace, you know, enjoying that over the anxiety of every time you're doing an interview, essentially you're walking into a brand new situation that you can't control.
Yeah. Right? Oh, that's good. Jeez. I guess I should be more nervous than I am.
Well, remember, like, you started off and you're like, oh, now I'm nervous. Now that I know you're recording, you're like, I'm so nervous. But then you talk about like you embrace kind of like, you know, building something new. But in reality, like, your first thought was like, oh, shoot, here we go. Like, we're on, and you can't control it. It's similar to like people who do like stand up, right? People are like, oh, it's so nervous, or some people can never do it. But then others are like, no, like, you know what I love? I love going out there and bombing. Then I can just like throw anything out there and like
Yeah.
people have this skill set. I heard Chris Rock say one time, like, he's like, do you ever just bomb? And he goes, like, I tell jokes and like, it might be a bad joke, but like at this point of 30, 40 years in the game, like I know tricks that I can do to bring it back. Like no one's going to boo me. I know how to bring it back into something much more favorable. And those are things that in interviewing or whatever, you make a bad joke, you know, you're supposed to be trying to make them laugh, or you make a bad joke and you know how to like quick change subject so that they're not left hanging on that. What the fuck did she just say? What does that mean? You know, you just go, anyway, so let me ask you something really, really important that's going to like draw you, you know, those are things that you start to pick up on and learn that are second nature, that someone else who maybe doesn't do that might just go, bad joke. What do I do? How do I get out of this?
Gosh, oh my gosh. Well, all I hear nowadays about these kids that are going for interviews is they feel like they're, you know, overqualified for everything. And the reality is they're underqualified for everything. But on top of that, like the social aspect, right? Like these, you know, and I call them kids, but like this generation that's supposed to be interviewing right now, right? Their phones are attached to their hips. They don't have the interpersonal skills to be able to communicate, you know, even like language, just, we have such a beautiful language. You know, you never hear anybody talk the way that they spoke in these old time movies, right? Everybody is like, you know, and OMG. And I just, probably not even what kids say nowadays, but that's all I know.
Mind blown emoji.
Yeah, like mind blown emoji, or like what's the new one? The skull and crossbones. Like no, skull and crossbones.
I'm dead.
I can't.
Casket emoji, skull emoji.
See, you're up in it. Like I don't know. I'm gonna have to come to you.
I don't use it.
Notes.
No, I don't use it. I if I ever do it, I type it out and I'll just actually say like laughing emoji. Because if that's how the kids do it, like I'll just type it out like an old person. I won't use pictures.
You like star laughing emoji.
I'll just type it. Not even like distinguishing, just straight up laughing emoji, crying emoji.
That's awesome.
High five emoji.
I'm gonna actually have to process that a little bit before I get back to you about whether or not that's funny or just utterly weird at this point.
It's both. It started off because I don't use an iPhone, so like emojis were never a thing that were like pushed on my smartphones. It was just like, oh, there's a side button here that you can hit that brings up emojis, and I was like, I haven't been using that for the last like 10 years, so I'm not going to start now. No, I'll just, and then people would just like send it, and people would get mad that I wasn't using, you know, emojis. And I was like, well, this is the best I can do for you.
Yeah. Emojis are better than acronyms though. Like there was a time period there where like it was only acronyms and I didn't know what any of them meant. ROFL,
LMAO.
All those. Yeah. No, just at least a picture gives me some general sense of what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. I always like to ask, like before I close out these interviews, I want to make sure I get a couple generics in there that put us in the time period. But for music, for you, what were you listening to in high school?
So really hard rock, A Perfect Circle, OTEP, Static X.
Oh wow.
9 Inch Nails, the classic 9 Inch Nails. Hard rock.
Wow, that's different.
Yeah. Straight through high school, all the way into college. Actually, I stopped listening to it when I was pregnant because I thought that maybe the baby would hear it and become like demonic or something. So I like actually stopped listening while I was pregnant. They're strange anyway, so I probably could have just kept listening to it. But yeah, really, really hard rock. Although I was kept. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Although I was kept in touch with like the bubblegum stuff, because when I work out, I always like to run, and when I work out, I like the like horrible bubblegum pop.
It's Britney bitch. Did you go to concerts and stuff for that type of music?
No, not college.
Okay.
I saw Drowning Pool a couple of times. They came through Lower Delaware, and so I saw Drowning Pool a couple of times, which was amazing. I think I was at a Seven Dust concert at one point in Philly, but that's it. I never grew up going to concerts. It wasn't allowed. Yeah. So didn't do a lot of them, unfortunately.
That's right. I didn't go to concerts. Loud. I didn't go to concerts either until college. So it was the same. And I loved music, but it wasn't anything that my parents didn't take me to concerts.
Yeah, yeah. No, never did a lot of concerts. And the other thing is I was never really drawn to them, right? Like you're out late. I was always really ready for bed at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Never really drank much, didn't do drugs. Like the scene itself wasn't something that I necessarily, and I'm deaf in one ear. So I
Really?
lost my, yeah, I lost my hearing when I was 12.
Get
How
out.
do we not talk about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I lost my hearing when I was 12, was out of school for 32 days in sixth grade, which is another reason sixth grade was like absolutely horrible. Um, and I was always told that I needed to be really careful with the hearing that I did have, because if I ever hurt that eardrum, I'd be shit out of luck basically for the rest of my life.
So
So
then,
never really went to concert.
so then you started listening to Nine Inch Nails with the volume all the way up.
Yeah, it seemed better than concerts. Yeah. But like when I run, so my girls and I listen to like books on tape. And so like I'll put one thing in my ear and I'll give the other one to them because I don't need it, which is
Yeah.
kind of
So completely deaf.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Which there's good and bad, right? So round tables are the bane of my existence because I cannot hear somebody like always on this side. So I do a lot of like, so funny. Yeah, a lot of that to this person. But my husband snores and the dog snores who lays in bed with us too. And so if I roll over, I can't hear them. How do
you get through cheerleading like that? That sounds dangerous and confusing if you're in cheer and you can't hear from one side.
It's not so much cheer. It actually was really difficult with Taekwondo because I lost it with vertigo.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason, I guess it's part of what can damage your cochlea, which is that seashell shape in your ear. But my balance is really bad. And so I used to compete and I used to do a lot more. But then as soon as I lost my hearing, my balance was really bad. So no more spinning kicks, no more, of the cool stuff.
Yeah.
And even now I've got really bad balance, but it's okay. I have other assets. Other skills.
Favorite movie?
Probably, gosh, if I had to pick one, Green Mile.
Green Mile, that's different. That's a new one.
Yeah, I love that show. It like pulls at your heartstrings. It's got a little bit of magic in it, which I think is really out there, and
that was huge. Michael Clark Duncan was like a beast during our era. He was like a huge star from that movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's good lessons in there. I just feel like that's a classic. I mean, Forrest Gump. Sure. That feels like an obvious one.
That's a classic.
The Green Mile, though, if it's on, I'll watch it always.
That's funny. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the moment now where I go through the yearbook and we find your entry.
Oh.
And we see here how you hold up with your lasting quote.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, don't look at the picture. There's a story behind the picture too. I think like mom sent it in, right?
No. Like this was like you take it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh boy.
It still looks like you.
I've discovered a flattening iron for my hair.
I feel like you used to do the curly hair too, though.
I used to perm it, Brad. Like I literally got like the spiral perm, which I love. But yeah, that like wavy thing is what it looks like when I just let it dry naturally. But technology.
You've got cross country 9 through 12, indoor track 9 through 10. Or I'm sorry, 9 through 10 cross country, indoor track 9 through 10, track 9 through 10. So you did track not for 2 years, and then that was it for your sports.
Yeah, that was it. In school, not a team player.
You said that. Foreign exchange 9 through 12. Did you take Japanese?
I did. Went to Japan.
You did the Japanese trip where our superintendent was embezzling all that money so he could buy samurai swords.
That's the one. Yeah, I was there. That's right.
Wow.
Yep. Watashi no namae wa Jenny desu.
Oh wow, that Watashi. Wait, say it again.
Watashi no namae wa.
Watashi no namae wa Bradu-kun. Look at me. Look at me.
Well
This is
done.
my start. This is my start. Harbster Sensei, Bokunevet Sensei will be so proud that I just nailed that on my second try. I copy and paste their, happy birthdays on her Facebook page, but I always like have to Google the full thing and make sure I'm saying it properly in hiragana and katakana. And you still speak any Japanese? I mean, you still speak Japanese, but can you like write it? Are you in any way like proficient?
No, that's legitimately the only thing I remember.
See, all I know is shishikane ne, because that's what I used to hear all the time was be quiet.
Oh.
Bradu-kun, shishikane ne. That was it. And gomi baku.
What's that?
I think that's trash can.
Oh, hey, that's a good one. Be quiet, trash can.
Be quiet in trash can. Sign language club 9 through 10. Was that because you could not hear out of your ear?
That's right.
You like how I
That's right.
How I called that being deaf? Is that because you could not hear because you were deaf in one ear?
That's right. A way to be sensitive to that. Thanks.
Yeah. And then stars 11 through 12. What is that?
Oh Lord, I don't even know. Honestly, I don't know what that was.
It feels like a club. New one. Yeah, it feels like a new one. I don't think anyone's talked about stars.
It obviously had a long-lasting impact on my life. So obviously.
Mom and Dad, I love you. Thanks for your support. Nikki, you're a wonderful person. My friends are
that was my new boyfriend.
Oh, okay. SB.
Scott Beck.
WM. I don't see any M's at my WM. Did you have like friends like outside of our school district?
Yeah, not local friends though.
Okay.
So I mentioned the other places that we lived throughout the year. So up in that area.
Yeah, I don't know the WM. It's not clicking.
I'm going to remember it at like 5 p.m. tonight, and I'm going to send you an email and be like, dude, this is who it was.
JL, Jess Lauer.
My girl.
SK. I always want to go to like a Stephanie.
Yeah. K. K. Who is K? Man, I wish I had a yearbook.
I'm looking quickly through the K's here to see. The only SK I can see is Sue Kim.
Oh yeah, it's Sue.
Oh.
Remember I talked about going out that window?
Yeah. There you go.
Uh-huh. That was Sue.
We've learned a lot. Good luck. Pat, I love you with all my heart. Thank you. Salty kisses forever.
Wow. So I did my new boyfriend and my old boyfriend on the same quote. Damn, I was ballsy. That's how I roll.
And just for shits and giggles, I saved the homecoming page.
Yeah. Look at that.
Look at that. I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. I held my breath.
See, I was a writer way back then.
Look at this layout. Like
you just thank the yearbook staff for that. I had nothing to do with the layout.
Yeah, even in comparison, I gotta say, like the stretched out pictures that the rest of the homecoming court has, like versus like your high quality full page photo is just like way superior. Can I ask you, like being someone that wasn't like in the cool crowd and didn't have a large group, how did you see that coming about to where it was like Jenny Martin won homecoming? In my head, that's almost like an out of the blue type of thing. Because where do you garner the support amongst the most popular girls in school to be voted? And Pat wasn't in like that group of like popular guys, so it wasn't like we've got to put these two as like our king and queens. Like, how does that happen from your perspective to where you get voted to be homecoming queen?
So remember I talked about the insecurities in high school, like major insecurities. My first thought after, wow, this is amazing, was it was a split vote. So because all of those popular girls were up there, I was kind of the one that wasn't popular. And
Mm-hmm.
so they all had split votes. And it was
Sneak.
not because I was the most popular or that anybody liked me. It was just that everybody else, couldn't decide between the popular girls. And so I was left over.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know. And, and it may have been the case, Brad, but it felt really good at that moment. And that was the launch pad for a lot of confidence building that I worked on for years after high school. So whether or not it was on purpose, it turned out the way it was meant to be for me,
Yeah.
because I needed that, I think. So.
Oh, that's so cool. That is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really cool. You should do this all the time. More of these. This is really, really
Thank
fun.
you.
I'm so glad that you're doing these, because I took a look at some of the other ones and it was fun to almost reconnect with people that I haven't spoken to or thought about, in years. So I'm glad that you're doing this. And I'm honored, by the way, that you reached out to me. So thank you.
Oh yeah. I'm so thankful you're like willing to do it, and like you didn't make me sweat over it at all. You were just like, it took you like, I feel like you looked at the links and you were just like 45 minutes later, you're like, oh, I'm in. I'm in. I was like, oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. This is what I do. I get on Zoom calls for a living. So this one's way more fun than most of them.
Oh, good. I'm hopefully I'm going to be the highlight of the day, or since it's a Monday, the highlight of the week for you.
100%. As soon as I get through all these emails that have come in here, I'm watching them on the screen.
I hear you.